personally, I'm not someone who is terrified of this like near-term existential risk from AI or even medium-term or long-term. I'm just not buying the argument that it's about to be Skynet.
I've been actually talking to investors because I'm noticing the investment class, if you will, is like becoming more politically active. So we're seeing like a lot more investors and technologists that are participating in politics publicly. Soon I'll be hosting another investor friend in Chicago to talk about Chicago's politics. But
oh, wild.
Yeah,
that's going to be crazy.
Yeah, and maybe equally as crazy as the Bay Area. I don't know.
Maybe, yeah.
We'll see. But Lee, maybe you could give just some context on like your background, what you're doing in the investment world, work-wise, and then we'll talk some politics.
Cool. Yeah, so I'm a partner at Root Ventures. We're a seed stage fund in San Francisco, down in the Mission, and we have 4 partners and a principal. We're all engineers. We kind of focus on the areas that we have been engineers and kind of continue to practice and build in. So that's kind of across every discipline of engineering you can think of: mechanical, software, electrical. So my background's mainly in software. I was at iRobot and then Pivotal. Was the first engineer at a startup called SideTour that we sold to Groupon. I was there for a bit, cool. And then was VP engineering and CTO at Teespring. Not a founder. I kind of came in during the growth stage. I think you know Evan, one of the founders. The other founder was Walker.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So then I kind of got into venture through angel investing a few years ago, and really just kind of like supporting technical founders with hard problems. So for me, that's been developer tools, software infrastructure, AI, and that's kind of moved from like computer vision several years ago and autonomous robotics to like these days, obviously more large language models or RL and tooling around that, applications of it.
It's legit. It's exciting. And are you from the Bay Area, or like where'd you grow up?
I grew up in South Florida. I'm a 5th generation Floridian.
Oh, nice.
My sister's kids are 6th generation,
Wow.
which is pretty nuts. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I went to school in Boston, and then I lived in New York. I moved here, I think it's 9 years ago now. I think it's 9 years. It'll be 9 years in May.
How is like the tech scene doing from your perspective? I know like a lot's changed, the pandemic, capital constraints. Like, I mean, how are you seeing things at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on. There's a lot to say, I guess. I mean, I think AI is the obvious thing. AI is having an impact in the public markets, like a huge, huge impact. And I think plenty of that activity is happening among startups. It's obviously happening in companies like OpenAI and Anthropic and others. And then it's happening inside of like the big tech companies. So it's sort of everywhere. And I think as an investor, the question is, where do you capture value? And, where's the room for where are the startups going to be capturing value? Where will labs and big tech capture value? And I think the other cool thing about it, and like I mentioned, I have, my partner Chrissy was the engineering program manager for the first Apple Watch. She has a deep hardware background, and hardware is back now, right? Like we've been doing hardware investments for a while, and like tools that support electrical engineers and mechanical engineers for a long time. And now it's super hot, and NVIDIA is obviously killing it, and lots of other companies like ARM. I mean, I think we're talking more about manufacturing, and tech is very exciting right now. It's especially the hard tech part that's really exciting, right? Like people don't talk to me anymore about their like Facebook for dogs, like that stuff's kind of gone.
Thank God too, by the way. Lee, there's something like in Chicago, we have like a lot of experimental factory floors. I'm not.
Sure.
You may have already seen, but I'm sure you've got like a lot of engineering peers that made their way to Chicago or whatever. So
it was a Groupon. Knew a ton of people there. Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Headquartered down here. So I go to these experimental factory floors occasionally just to look at like the different applications, and they introduce like robotics and different kinds of AI modeling techniques. And it's kind of cool because like there's like a big push in defense manufacturing right now to like
Totally.
increase the capacity of our defense sector domestically, if you will.
Yep.
And then just being like Chicago being kind of at the base of America's manufacturing prowess, I guess.
Hmm.
It's cool to see like young people specializing in like you were saying, hard tech, or the hardware software interplay. And then I noticed like a lot of people that are like building new types of modeling techniques are like, well, we might also want a chip, or like some kind of chipset to
Hmm.
complement that. I'm seeing some of those trends too, and I think it's freaking exciting. I don't
Totally.
know what changed in the venture world, or if it's always been political, but
Hmm.
but I wonder like
Sure.
because Guy, I love following you on
Yeah,
Twitter.
what changed is an interesting question.
Yeah, like well, what motivated you to kind of become more outspoken, and maybe we can talk about the industry as a whole.
Yeah. Oh man. I mean, my personal story is maybe like a little bit, I don't know if it's the same as the industry story. I think, um, look, I was always about as far left as you can get everywhere I've ever lived,
Okay.
even Boston and New York, and certainly in Florida. And I came to San Francisco and I supported a lot of the like sort of self-styled progressives at the beginning. And I think I slowly kind of realized I don't believe anymore that the people that call themselves progressives in the city are creating progressive outcomes. I think the first thing I saw there was under Chesa Boudin, in town halls and things. I would watch him dismiss women talking about street harassment, or the fears that they have about crime, right? And he would sort of cite statistics when people would talk about their experiences. My now wife, um, uh, had a friend that was assaulted and a police officer that did nothing, right? And I think a lot of people say, does this fall on the district attorney? Like, not necessarily. I think it's among the police, the DA, judges, certainly even mayors and supervisors have something to do with it. But um, Chesa was really just kind of gaslighting the population and saying this is not a
Okay.
problem. And that for me was intolerable. I think he certainly had a lot of good arguments about systemic racism in policing and the judicial system that I agree with completely. And I really dislike that his solution to that was, so we're just going to sort of let things happen and let chaos reign.
Yeah.
Um, when the alternative was someone who also believes in criminal justice reform and has direct experience. I'm talking about Brooke Jenkins,
Okay.
has direct experience in her family with people on both sides of the law. Um,
Yep.
and I think that just repeats itself in so many ways. While that was going on, the Board of Education, a number of people were getting recalled. They did a number of things that basically made us the laughing stock of the nation. Like I think even New Yorker wrote an article that absolutely lampooned us,
Oh.
just simply by interviewing the vice chair of our board and just letting her talk. And he was
Okay.
like, "This is gobbledygook. Like this makes no sense." Um, we had all kinds of reasons to be banning algebra, to spend our time during a pandemic, renaming Dion Feinstein Elementary School,
Yeah.
and all this stuff, right? And even things that ended up being illegal. And the chair sued the board after she called Asian parents adjacent to white supremacy on Twitter,
Oh,
um,
geez.
and not even a specific person. She didn't even say like, "Hey,
Yeah.
this person is a white supremacist." She's like Asian parents in general.
Oh my
So,
goodness.
so that doesn't fly, um, even in this city.
Sure.
So, so yeah, there was just kind of a big backlash. My perception is a lot of people realize these things all at once, because
Okay.
despite what a lot of people say, tech is a very left-leaning industry.
Yeah.
Um, and we certainly have our loud conservatives and libertarians, and everybody knows their names and
Right.
podcasts and stuff. Um,
Right. Mark
but
Andreesen, is one. David
sure,
Sachs. You don't
Yeah,
have
you
to
can
claim
say the
any of
name.
this. I'll claim it.
Yeah, 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 for
Okay.
sure, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think by and large, I think that's really true, and you can see that in the causes we donate to, right? And here locally, and I've been talking a lot about this. I'm hoping to be able to write something about this soon, um, like a serious piece about it. But they love to kind of push back and say, like, well, this moderate pushback, this sort of like Gary Tan and all this is all right
Okay.
wing. And you look at the people we're pushing, and there's just like no way that's true. Like we
Yeah.
have, like we have Trevor Chandler running in District 9 in the Mission. His opponent is a communist. She
Oh,
describes
wow.
herself, right? And
Literally.
like, yeah, yeah. And so like she's has literally not put forward any policy positions whatsoever. Trevor is running to the right of her, to the right of someone that attends Mao Zedong book club readings.
Oh my
But
goodness.
he's someone who like battled the Westboro Baptist Church when he like went to Topeka to try to get a trans rights bill passed.
Yep.
And he doesn't even live there. And like he was campaigning for marriage equality back before even Obama supported it.
Okay.
And Bilal Mahmoud is another guy that's like sort of attacked. His opponent's a Democratic socialist, and he's
Okay.
attacked for being moderate. But he just endorsed Barbara Lee, who is the most left person out of four for the Senate. And she's sort of squad level leftist, and
Oh,
he
wow.
endorsed her. He called Elon Musk a racist and a transphobe on Twitter and said, "I won't take his money even if he tries to give it to me." So like these are the people
Wow.
like in this city. They're like that person's a moderate. They're in the
Yeah.
middle. They're a centrist, right? And I'm like, no, these people are progressives. Even in other blue, in New York, he would be a progressive.
Yeah.
In Boston, he would be a progressive. In San Francisco, he's a centrist.
Okay. Do you think it's kind of like the war of progressives in San Francisco politics?
Yeah, it's long been a joke, right, that we sort of have both parties. We have, liberals and socialists, or
Oh,
liberals, yeah,
yeah.
and so
It's crazy because like I was born in San Jose, but my parents split like 50 years in the Bay, and
yep,
obviously my mom doesn't like San Francisco anymore. She got there in the early 70s. She doesn't like it anymore because she can't believe that there are all these tech companies, and she can't believe
right,
the public services are failing in a community that's created all this new money. Even
totally,
just something basic like Nancy Pelosi's husband getting assaulted, like
totally,
that should shock people, if not even your political elites. Like,
right, for
can
sure.
feel safe in the county, in San Francisco County. Are there certain issues that you've been focused on, or like kind of like any opposition to certain issues that are important to you that you've been dealing with? Is there anything that comes to
Yeah,
mind?
yeah, a few. I mean, certainly the education and public safety. But I think that was sort of something over the last couple years. It just ended up so popular. Like it's just sort of, as soon as you basically told people like you have permission to speak up about this, I think they all did. Um, and That's something I give a lot of credit to Gary Tan for. And it again against the narrative. It's not just tech people because you look at every single district in this. This is good timing because we just had our primary um, last Tuesday, obviously, and just like the school board recall, we had a measure to bring algebra back. Something that the half recalled, we only recalled half of them because there's like eligibility windows. We recalled everyone that was eligible, um, and something they did was remove the option for middle school algebra, um, and so we passed a ballot measure that was a resolution to bring it back, non-binding resolution, but it passed in every single district. So this is not just tech people by any means. Um, the other thing, like lately, that I've been kind of pushing on a lot is self-driving cars, which you may have seen. For me, there's a couple things here. I think I first heard about self-driving cars when I was in college. I had Gil Pratt as an advisor, he's now, like, you may have to fact check me if I get his title wrong. I believe his title is CEO of Toyota Research Institute. Um, but in any case, he runs a huge chunk of research at Toyota. And back in 2001, no, no, would have been like 2005. He gave a talk about self-driving cars in the DARPA Grand Challenge, and he kind of opened it with the amount of automotive deaths and just comparing this to other sources of death in the world. and it's staggering, right? And it's actually only gotten worse. Um, this is, I think, one of humanity's greatest challenges, in both in terms of the impact. Like, I don't know. So some people, I say this and they're like, you're already preaching to the converted. But for a lot of folks, you know, I don't see why eliminating traffic deaths should be any different than eliminating cancer or HIV/AIDS or hypertension. Right? Like, this is a leading cause of death. Um, and there's a lot of approaches to this. A lot of urbanists make things safer for bicycles. All about this. All about it. And I think one of the things we could do is, um, let's remove the humans from the driver's seat. Um, Certainly, maybe with cars, maybe with taxis, maybe with buses, but it's also a great challenge in terms of the technical feasibility. Is, at the time that Professor Pratt gave that talk, he was sort of, this may not be possible. This was well ahead of the revolution in deep learning and well ahead of transformers and large language models and all this recent stuff. So it works. It works. And the state of California, which is one of the most regulatory states in the country, we love to do our own regulations,
Yeah.
and
And
you
spread them
probably
across the country.
totally. And sometimes I like these things, and sometimes I'm like, guys, what are you doing?
Sure.
Um, but they've been working hand in hand, with the autonomous vehicle providers for a long time, and data reporting requirements, all this stuff. San Francisco is constantly finding ways to undermine
Mm.
this system. They're messing around with who can use parking lots for what.
Okay.
They're lobbying. They kind of started an AstroTurf movement,
Okay.
uh, that using like labor interests, making false claims about the safety records of particularly Waymo, whose
Jeez.
safety record is basically spotless.
Okay.
Um, and To me, I think I care about it for so many reasons. I think the populist far leftists here know that they can score points by trying to bloody the nose of faceless tech.
Yeah.
So that's what they're doing, I think, primarily. I think
Okay.
also I think they're interested in the labor interests, but I don't know. My perception is the police and firefighters unions were 100% behind this in the beginning,
Yeah.
and somebody changed their opinion
Mm.
for a period of time, and now I think it's back.
Okay.
This is ultimately very, very good for first responders, and
Sure.
it's going to require the AV providers to work with the first responders and make sure the technology serves them. But ultimately, think of if fire trucks, ambulances, and police cars don't have to go to every crash because there aren't any.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. Exactly. They'll be pissed because their funding will go down. They'll have to shrink.
Yeah, it could be. It could be. The ones I've talked to, are I think have the right attitude, which is like, yeah, it would free up our time for the more important work we want to do.
Yeah.
Community policing and walking the beat and stuff, right, and
Sure.
responding to calls. Um, so I don't know. The when the city wants to be obstructionist about something, um, man, they always find a way.
Yeah. Well, the city has a fascinating legacy of politics, right? Like we've also
Sure.
had like tremendously popular cult leaders and people that
Yeah.
have created new religions. And Jim Jones was a politician in San Francisco. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
and then there's been some heinous incidents. I don't remember the exact people, but in the 80s and 90s, and there's been some very famed politicians like Nancy Pelosi, who's probably one of the most powerful American politicians in our history, I would say, ever. A lot of people don't want to acknowledge that because
Yep.
it's true, right? Very powerful American politician. So I mean, there's been it's like the community has made these like great contributions to large parts of the world, but it has very like eclectic local version of its own style of politics. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Like even just it's very cool too to hear the way you're talking about the opportunity for driverless cars and more automation in the personal vehicle, but then also like the political factions locally, because it sounds like you need to test in the environment where you're building a lot of this stuff. So it's helpful if the local government will work with your founders and
Totally.
organizations that are building. And it sounds like that's still an ongoing challenge to like build something and get support from San Francisco County, for example.
Totally. Well, I think, I mean, and I can only guess, but if you look at Waymo's two first markets, and a few of the other providers do the same thing, Phoenix, Arizona area, and San Francisco. So I think they picked Phoenix. I've been told is used a lot by automotive companies to test new cars. I think
Okay.
they like attracting this. They have really good regulations. They work with you. And then San Francisco has a super challenging urban environment. Lots of bikes and pedestrians, lots of dogs, more dogs than children, more dogs than Republicans, actually.
Oh,
Lots of
really?
dogs. Yep.
Jeez.
And yep. And unless, I mean, I'm not counting the political affiliation of the dog,
Yeah, exactly.
but yeah. um, Totally derailed with that. I loved sharing that fact with
It's a
you.
good one though.
I think it's a challenging environment, and then certainly the anti-tech bias of the current majority of the board of supervisors makes it hard. So I think maybe their point of view there was, if we can do it here, we can do it anywhere. And then
Yeah.
also the reality is it's not supposed to be the city that has control over this. The DMV and the California Public Utilities Commission both regulate different components of this, and it is
Okay.
supposed to be within the state's jurisdiction. Um, and so I think that maybe that was kind of their point, was they can work with the state. The state has been working with them. And
Sure.
like you said, when California passes regulations, a lot of other states will look to us. It's kind of admirable. They're trying to solve the hardest problem first.
Yeah, I see that. And I think also like the when you talk about the politics leaning left, I think like one part of the technology industry or even the hippie scene, I guess, that kind of informed a lot of the technology industry was like egalitarianism
Yeah,
and
sure,
democratization. I feel like
sure.
I feel like if you're trying to like spread a technology so that the most people can receive benefits from it, maybe that is like more of a left ideal than it would be right. But then it's like, you've got some like
Hmm,
pretty right people in the Bay, like Peter Thiel. It's a perfect
sure.
example of somebody that even funds interest groups that oppose his own personal preferences or interests. It's like, but he was outspoken to the point where like going to the RNC made him want to move to Los Angeles, you know, because it's like how does that even work, right? And so like, maybe after the pandemic, the cost became lower for the tech world to put its politics on the table. I mean, I think people forget
Hmm.
because it's been a while. The government was like pounding on social media companies. Congress was
Oh,
really
totally.
hard on Mark Zuckerberg. I
Of
don't know if it
course.
was completely fair, right? But it seems
Yep.
like a society creates these like straw mans. What do you think about people that like want to slow down the production of artificial intelligence applications? Do you have thoughts on that?
A little bit of a pivot. Yeah.
Okay.
I, yeah, I, well, personally, I'm not someone who is terrified of this like near-term existential risk from AI, or even medium-term or long-term. I think the kinds of things we're developing and talking about right now, to me, I'm just not buying the argument that it's about to be Skynet. I think a lot of what the AI safetyism is really talking about, and like what Congress is really talking about, they're not asking questions about, will this AI start the Terminator movie? They're they're asking about misinformation, disinformation, offensive content, things like that, right? To me, this is just every little bit of technology runs into this challenge with Congress. Even DVDs, even music, CDs, right? Tipper Gore was a big person behind let's get warning labels on all these CDs when she was second lady, I guess. Um, so um, I I I think it's a little overblown, and I think it's too early to write really smart, accurate, good um, regulations. uh, and I think that the upside of this stuff is underappreciated. I think the risk is I think massively overinflated, and I don't think many people are thinking too deeply about all the incredible things that we could be doing. If you look at applications in healthcare, um, I guess that's my that's my other like weird take is like I don't know exactly how you do effectively regulate this. So, for
Yeah.
example, in the UK, there's a lot of stuff they're very concerned about if models are doing predictions that are related to people's health. Um, the NHS England had a recent thing about, or not, it's not recent at this point, it's a couple years ago, about model explainability when it's used for diagnostics. So it's kind of interesting if I were ever at the point, God forbid, that I had an illness where I felt like um, I wasn't getting the care I needed, and I thought AI could bridge the gap. Who the fuck is going to stop me from downloading some weights and running it? Like, thankfully, I have the knowledge to do that, and there are a lot of people that have the knowledge to do that, and it's only getting easier and easier. Like, I don't know that you're going to be able to stop people from pirating weights, particularly if it's life saving when the stakes are that high. So I think people underestimate the hacker culture that's existed since people were whistling to get free phone calls on payphones, right?
Oh yeah, exactly. I agree. Well, and there's like an interesting set of actors that are kind of like trying to regulate or slow down artificial intelligence development, right? Like there is the people that are on the left that are pushing more of the kind of like ethics narratives, we'll call it, just to simplify.
Yep.
But then there may be some on the right who are just very afraid of how the technological innovation will impact the labor market.
Sure.
So what my thought is that maybe we're overblowing the kind of like woke way of thinking about AI, but we're understating the impact it's going to have on like the services sector. People can barely get a college degree, right? There's like 70% of Americans don't even have a bachelor's degree. And we know that even if you get a bachelor's degree, the chances that you're going to be able to reskill and change industries and learn new capabilities in your 30s, 40s, 50s, we know it's very slim. So like, where do you kind of stand on like, what do we tell people that are like, is the AI going to take my job? Like, how do we
Totally.
like, you know?
Totally. I was going to say, I mean, honestly, I was about to say it before you even prompted me. Like, this is the one risk I think is real. So like, don't
Okay.
think that I believe like, oh, it's all rainbows and utopia and there's no drawbacks. I think
Sure.
this is real, and it's real for most technology. I think probably what will happen is what's mostly happened through history, which is the jobs kind of move around and they change. We don't have people pulling levers and pushing buttons for you on the elevator anymore, and that's okay. the that's what economics tells you, but what I think, hopefully your conscience and ethics tells you is that the shuffling in the meantime is going to cause a lot of damage. So I don't know what happened to those people that used to pull the lever on the elevator. What did they do for work right after that? We should be very, very focused. If I could tell the government there's one thing in AI you should focus on, I should be like, you need to figure out how to create a safety net for labor displacement, because it might happen slowly, but it also might happen really quickly. Um, and that's going to be a problem. I believe, again, as I'm a normal ass Democrat, I believe that there's a place for government to do things like that, and I don't think that is protect those jobs at all costs. I think it's robust social safety net, and I think you're right. Retraining has had really mixed results. I think
Yeah.
there are, I think, a few examples of places where it has worked, but many where it hasn't. Um, Look, my brother is an incredibly fucking talented auto mechanic on high end cars, and
Yep.
he knows internal combustion engines crazy well.
Hmm.
If the world were overrun by Teslas, I think folks like that would be cross trained on.
Yeah.
Look, it's easy. It's easy
Yeah.
for any skilled mechanic to learn new cars, or not
Yep.
easy, but it's doable. And certainly when it comes to electric technology, it's a completely different beast, and they may need less maintenance.
Right.
But I guess my point of view is like, well, but is that a reason to slow it down? Like we want zero emissions much faster. it would be great if these cars lasted longer and needed less maintenance. That's better for people's total cost of ownership. It's better for their wallets. It's probably better for the total life cycle impact on the environment.
Yeah.
Um, so I think we should look at those upsides of automation. I think automation usually, in the long run, creates efficiencies that are good for the economy and therefore,
Yeah.
good for everyone.
Well, and also,
Um,
Lee, just to bring like a conservative argument in for automation,
sure. Yep.
as like my dad was a Republican in the Bay Area. I don't know how that happened. A black Republican.
One
Uh,
of the few, the
yeah,
few, the proud, I guess. Yeah.
I guess, yeah. But so I kept the affiliation, and that might change soon, though. We'll see what happens. But uh, so on the conservative side, one of the things I worry about. So I grew up in Colorado Springs. I moved there from the Bay Area when I was like 9, and so I've just always been around talks of military operations, and
Sure.
so and then just a gun culture, and so like here's another place where I think we need to accelerate automation and AI is in combat. And one of the things I'm noticing now, just watching different combat videos and talking to people, we have soldiers that cannot defend themselves from small uh, drones. What would you call consumer drones? Where they attach
Sure.
a payload to a consumer drone. You can operate them pretty easily from a couple miles away remotely. It's not extraordinary. And the soldiers actually like are completely defenseless. Like an AR
Hmm.
or M16 is not going to do anything to a drone if a guy can even hit it, right? And so
Yep.
like this is like one place where I think we need to increase automation on top of like driverless cars and other areas is military operations. And we know
Totally.
there are countries that like Iran and Russia and China that are making significant investments in technological innovation. And one thing that is driving this like intense security competition between the US and China is their ability to kind of strip our intellectual property, build it faster, build it cheaper. So this is like another kind of like pro we need to push forward uh, kind of like perspective is like, there's still a lot of blue collar jobs where like military is pretty blue collar, you know, they're impacted if other countries or non-state actors, uh, advance faster than like the American military does, which is happening in certain ways.
Yep.
Uh, well, and I also think so. Like, it's cool to talk to you about this, by the way, because like I talk to like a lot of like very conservative political economists that like shit on Wall Street,
Oh,
and Wall
interesting.
Street pays them a fee to talk shit to them, or like or like a lot of social democrats who are culturally conservative, right?
Right.
So
Sure. I know
they may
exactly what you
want
mean. Yep.
safety nets, but don't disrupt my way of life. Okay,
Totally. Yeah. Yeah.
keep your
No
religion
new
and
housing.
politics
No
to
new
yourself.
housing.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Where I think people are getting scared in the jobs arena is like there's less education, harder to reskill, this kind of like anti-globalist perspective on the world. So they're like, who cares about international competition if like I'm not involved in that? And so like again, I think this is where like how the coding boot camps emerged and how a lot of your colleagues and peers built that infrastructure.
Yep.
I think we should be trying to build that for like the driverless mechanics, and we should put that in
Totally.
Cleveland or in Southern Illinois, in Kansas City,
Yep.
or like electric car mechanics, or what like I think we should start to build these skills as soon as possible. That I think could have a positive impact instead of just being in opposition. But what, I mean, what do
Totally.
you think?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, even with the autonomous cars, right? I think the ultimate vision and the reason that Waymo is not sold in a dealership, it's a rideshare application, right? So I on my phone, I have Uber, Lyft, Waymo, and Cruise. And that's if I'm using a car, if I'm not using public transit or walking, that's how I get around. And I bias towards the autonomous vehicles. But people need to maintain those fleets, right? I think the job shifts from you're a driver to there's an area these things congregate. You need to be, cleaned, serviced, charged, all this stuff, right? And again, I think with a lot of techies, they look at jobs like that and they're like, again, it's the funny thing about a lot of sort of social democrats is like they'll view themselves as very progressive and then look down their nose at these jobs. And they're like, well, that's not a job I would take, so that's a shit job. And you're like, well, but compared to driving, there are probably some people that would prefer it.
Yeah,
And
agreed.
and also I don't think there's going to be zero drivers. So I think it's just sort of the balance of these things shifts. Um, so yeah, and on the retraining thing, yeah, I wish I knew more about this. This feels like something I should really go a lot deeper into. But what are the specific sort of characteristics of a retraining program that work versus don't work? When I was at Pivotal, I had a lot of coworkers from Perth, Australia, and they told me that there was a lot. This was, I want to say, 20. This is like 2010 to 2012. The mining industry had kind of collapsed out there, and they said there had been pretty successful retraining of people working in the coal mining industry to working in building software. And Perth actually ended up being a place that was really good to recruit software engineers from, is one reason. We had a recruiter that spent a bunch of time there. So I don't know, why did they do a good job of that? And when we've tried to do some things like this, it hasn't always worked.
I think one constraint is we like try to pull reskilling through the for-profit
Mm.
education system, which we've seen be like
Oh,
incredibly
sure.
extractive and
Yeah, for
abusive.
sure. For sure.
Whereas like honestly, I think there is a tech future way. Like, why couldn't I have some capability on this endpoint, right? All the other capabilities are there. Where I could like skill on electric car mechanics or and it's fascinating too because like a lot of people get rich when the tech uh, becomes abundant because it does create a thriving services sector. And that there's
Sure.
people that want to do services jobs. It works better for their lifestyle, and it's a large part of the economy. So it's like if those jobs become more technical, they could be considered more high skilled or maybe a little bit more higher paying. I mean, you know, but it's a conundrum. I don't have the answer.
Totally. Well, I think, I don't know, my worldview is like ultimately you can't stop the progress from happening. There's nothing you can do that's going to stop it. And that ultimately it does end up better. And I think like basic economics teaches us that, more efficiencies and lowering costs and lowering labor, making things more automatic tends to create more prosperity. But again, like I completely agree with you. And I always emphasize this, like you cannot forget that all of those equations are about steady states. And in the real world, you have these, you know, um, sort of oscillating chaos before you get to equilibrium, and that's the period where people get hurt.
Yeah, I
Um,
agree. Also think, Lee, that we could create a robot operator school, and that could be
yep,
like then one of the next coding schools is like straight out of high school robotic operation. You know,
totally.
and then like these jobs could replace like HVAC or plumbing if there's more technological ways to do that. I mean, so I
Yep.
try to be optimistic.
Well, we may be. I mean, I'm wondering how much we end up re-emphasizing the trades at some point, right? Because people often talk about how trades have been de-emphasized. And that's also coincided with us out, offshoring, outsourcing a lot of manufacturing and hard industry, as we're trying to re-onshore that stuff for a lot of different reasons. Um, and I mean, I think this was a big part of the Jobs Act, if I'm not wrong. You probably know more about this than me. Some um, allocation towards like jobs and training for people working in silicon.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. They want to build some foundries domestically, which would be incredible, actually. We should do
totally.
that.
So if we're doing that, I mean, those kinds, whatever schools are doing that, those kinds of schools can be doing more of this. Yeah, and I agree. Those for-profit colleges are just like, they're the ones that always get cited when you're talking about predatory lending and student loan forgiveness. It's crazy how many of these schools um, are at the top of that list. Um,
And a lot of the people that need to reskill, that's all they can access or all they think they can access.
Totally. But the government, I mean, city governments, state governments run, we run community colleges, we run state colleges, state universities. those degree programs are under our control. If we decide we want to bring the trades back in, right, and destigmatize them, and don't make it like, oh, well, that's a trade level education, and this is a much more prestigious BA in art history, right? But
Yeah.
you're like a lowly tradesman. So like, why we need to kill that part of the culture,
I agree.
and bring glory back to the tradespeople.
Yeah, I agree. And I think maybe like if the last 15 years was about, or 10 to 15 years was about SaaS, maybe like you're saying, we'll get back to like where in the high school people are working on hardware issues and that will become more popular instead of just coding. But maybe it's like blended.
Totally.
Like, why not just code and work on hardware? This is where, large part of industry is going. Do you, so Lee, I know we're going to wrap here, but it's been actually like really cool to hear your perspective on this. And I think this will be unique for a lot of my viewers, listeners. But they're like,
Cool.
okay, here's the hot take question. What do you think about this like Google Gemini woke AI
Oh
controversy?
yeah. Oh man, I'm almost like sick of it because I think I tweeted like, how do I get a Twitter timeline that's more people that are excited about Gemini's 1 million token context window than are excited about this content. So yeah, without knowing your listeners, right? I mean, I think Gemini is an incredibly capable language model, kind of unbelievably capable on certain axes. That tends to be the case when all these different model providers are coming out with new models. A lot of times they're sort of like, wow, this is number one at this particular feature, but it's kind of trading off this other feature. And Gemini, picking a large context window is super interesting. It basically means like the amount of data that you can put in for inference is very large. So there are a lot of exciting use cases for that. But what they've done, from what I can tell, is they put this sort of layer on top of it that I like to call they call it a safety layer. I like to call it a safetyism layer, because I think there's sort of, I view this as sort of a political point of view that models, I don't know what this is. People hang me for this. I just view it as very, I don't really understand why people care so much what it is
Yeah.
when the model says something offensive, right? Like,
Yeah.
if I can write a Python script that'll say something super offensive. I can type it into Word. I can put it on a website. I can let Google index it. You can
Right.
search swear words and racist comments, and even horrible regressive ideas. You can Google and find. You can find them in the library.
Yeah.
So
You can
I
find them
don't
at the university.
totally.
Yeah, like
So
scientific racism.
yeah, that's a thing, man. I've had some people throwing some of those graphs in my replies when I talked about this issue before. I'm like, God damn. Actually, yeah. Back on the SF topic. This is way off topic what you asked, but it's so funny. Um, Somebody said, when I was talking about the algebra thing, the argument against algebra here was that it creates racial inequality, because they basically looked at the fact that, I think the number was like four times, like black students were like 4x underrepresented in calculus in San Francisco public schools. And me as a normal Democrat, I go, that's horrible. Why don't we have teachers that are reaching kids better? And I don't know when that starts. Does that start at preschool, or does it start at eighth grade? I don't know. Sounds like we have a problem. And their point of view was algebra must be racist. Let's ban it. And I'm not really exaggerating. And so that's how they equalize the playing field. And so when I was complaining about this, somebody says, "Yeah, you should never don't teach math to those kids because they're never going to get it." And I was like, I legitimately cannot tell whether you're a San Francisco progressive or a Nazi. And
Yeah, I
he said, "Actually,
agree.
I'm a Nazi." And I was like, "I okay,
Oh
could have gone either
no.
way." Like, you're making the same argument.
Yeah. It's unfortunate. I think that a lot of the way that people learn in school starts with how their parents learned and then how their parents talk to them about education. And
Yep.
that's a tough gap that the public school system hasn't, been able to bridge. But I don't think that it
Totally.
means we're like in this hopeless situation where we need to strip disciplines from the curriculum. I mean, it's like there's got to be a
One of
creative way to
It's
solve
so
that.
crazy. One of my most fundamental beliefs. I'm on the board of a college and an engineering school, and One of my most fundamental beliefs is everyone has the capability to learn math. I think that we don't do a good job teaching it. I think that's across the board. And I think my mom's a special ed teacher. I think we
Okay.
particularly don't do a good job teaching math to people with learning disabilities.
Yeah.
I think a lot of students want representation. They want teachers that look like them,
Sure.
their race or their gender or whatever, right? We male teachers are way overrepresented in STEM versus other disciplines. So
Sure.
I think all of those are really important and worthy. Most people, when you talk to people that say they're bad at math and you ask them their story, it's crazy how often I talk, particularly to women who say, I was so good at math until X grade, and then I just couldn't get past whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and then you gave up because you decided you were bad at math. You labeled yourself. We allow this identity in this culture of this is someone who's good at math. This is someone who's bad at math.
Yeah.
You're allowed to identify as someone who's bad at math. And I think that's tragic.
It
Everyone can
is.
get there.
Well, and Lee, I didn't go to college until I was 31. I'm 35 now, but I actually learned
Yeah.
statistics in my 30s without having the prerequisites because I was working on computers when I was in middle school and high school, and it was very hard to check into the classroom.
Yep.
But
Totally.
again, I still had like my ass goes and buys a freaking textbook on probability theory, which who knows that the guy died before he finished probability theory, and some of his PhD students tried to fill in the gaps, and that probabilities are theoretical. You would never think that if you talk
Sure.
to statisticians, right?
Of course. No, and people say this. People said this too. I was shocked that people were arguing with me about this. They were like, "Well, why do we need kids to learn calculus? Like, why do San Francisco public schools have to offer calculus? It's useless." I was like, "No, but calculus is beautiful.
Yeah,
Calculus is the language of the planet. It's of the like, lived world. Like it's the math that you need to explain physics. The original Newton text on physics was called Natural Philosophy. That was the title of the
yeah,
book. Like math, if you this is what I mean when you talk about how to approach and reach kids. Like if you have a kid that's less interested in how does a beam bend or whatever, but they're more interested in the philosophy, then teach them that way. Or if they want to use a
yeah.
computer and learn statistics by writing software, teach them that way. And I know that's hard. I know it's expensive. It takes resources. But
Sure.
in this city, we have so much goddamn money. It's fucking
Tons.
crazy. We have
Extraordinary amounts.
800,000 people and a $13 billion budget. So, like,
Yeah,
if we, I would much rather pay higher taxes and hire more and better teachers than get rid
yeah.
of algebra. Every day of the week, you can raise my taxes all day long as we're getting more out of it instead of less.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. Lee, we need to talk more frequently as my channel grows and you
Oh,
have
yeah.
epic perspective. And also, Lee, if you have other disillusioned friends in tech that want to talk politics,
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
here. Okay, so
I've
send
got
them
a
my
few
way.
names.
Please, okay. All right, Lee, but it's been great to host you, and I'll include your Twitter and because it's exciting,
Oh, yeah.
and all the places to find you online.
Awesome. Sounds good. All right. Talk soon.
Thanks, Lee.